AI and OSIS 5 here in San Francisco. My name is Maria and I'm standing here with Mark from RoadBotics. Hi.
Hi Maria, thanks for having me here.
Thank you for taking the time.
Sure.
Can you quickly introduce yourself and your company?
Sure, I'm CEO of a company called RoadBotics. We help people assess road surfaces in the US, about 18 states, and in 5 countries around the world. We do that with artificial intelligence and a standard cell phone. And the way it's done is it's simply use the cell phone to capture image data. That image data, as soon as a standard phone sees a friendly Wi-Fi, that goes up to the cloud, and our deep learning platform then isolates the road in the image and assesses it just like a pavement engineer would assess a roadway.
So what fascinates you about autonomous driving that you founded a company?
Well, actually, we were born out of the autonomous vehicle technology, and we're in part funded by a company that's deep into it. BMW is one of our investors. The technology was born out of Carnegie Mellon University, the Robotics Institute, where a lot of early autonomous vehicle technology was developed. One of the researchers, a gentleman named Dr. Christoph Mertz, who was part of that autonomous vehicle research, decided, gee, you know, we're using this image processing to move these vehicles around. Couldn't we dual purpose the information we collect about the roadway for people who maintain the roads? That got me interested in the idea of starting this company, and the conclusion I drew was the autonomous vehicle revolution is only going to hit when they have the quality roads to meet the needs of these vehicles.
You want to start a revolution with these autonomous driving, and you want to give them the tools to make a new mobility and start a new mobility.
Absolutely, and I would even make a bold claim here. I think that because what's going to happen is this, and this is a controversial thing I'm about to say, but here it goes. If you buy into the autonomous vehicle revolution, which I do, you're going to take the roughly, in the US case, 260 million vehicle owners and reduce them down to maybe no more than a dozen fleet owners that we'll all use, like perhaps Daimler, certainly BMW, Toyota, whoever. And they're going to look at the road network. Their profitability is going to be impacted by the quality of the road. And they're going to look at the road network in the same way the auto insurance industry does, which is it's costing $100 billion a year, all of us, for the bad roads. And I believe, controversially, that you will see 2 things happen. One is the fleet owners, the autonomous fleet owners, will get together and start sharing data about road quality, not unlike the Star Alliance does in the industry, where they share infrastructure and work together. And then an even bigger thing is going to happen. You'll see a privatization of the maintenance of urban roads and highways around the world. Right now they're owned by public entities, but you'll see a privatization where the roads either will be privatized in their ownership and or their maintenance, and they will be funded largely by the fleet owners.
So does this mean in conclusion that we have better roads because not the government and the taxpayers are responsible for it, but like companies like Daimler or whoever owns this road?
Because they'll be the only users, in effect. The problem you have right now is the tragedy of the commons, as economists say, where trucks, for example, 18-wheelers do as much damage on a road surface, one pass, as 2,500 vehicles, but they don't pay too much more in servicing those roads. The gas tax is inadequate. But the bigger issue is the sheer amount of money, just using the US for example, the sheer amount of money that's estimated to bring US roads up to a minimum standard is in the trillions of dollars.
Really?
Really. And there's really no other source of capital that's going to be available except the primary users, and those will be the big fleet owners.
So, like you said, we have big fleet owners. Will there be something like private ownership of a car like we have right now, or will it also be like shared mobility like we have with Uber or with Car2Go, or what Drive Now is another company that does it? Or
that's a good question. I think there'll be various models. I think one model will have us paying BMW or Daimler a monthly fee to have complete 100% access to a car, a vehicle, locally. In other cases, we may own the autonomous vehicle. The problem with that is you're back to the problem we have now, which is little utilized. So I think in limited circumstances, perhaps wealthier people might have a fancier carriage, if you will, for their needs. But for the most part, I think the fleet owners will be the owners of the vehicle, and we'll treat it as, the terms I've heard is transportation as a service, mobility as a service, but effectively the model, the mode, the way we use Uber cars today is ultimately the way the autonomous vehicles will be used in the future, in my opinion.
So we will, not have like I own a car like we do now, and we don't have like I need to pay for a driver's license. So where's the fun in all the driving? Because right now I can get me a Ferrari and just cruise the city and.
Well, I had an interesting opportunity when I was in Germany and meeting with our investors at BMW, and I had a chance to meet some of the Porsche designers. And I asked them, I said, how do you feel about the autonomous vehicle revolution? Because, the excitement about owning a Porsche is driving it.
Yeah.
If you take that away, you're just a passenger in a sports car. And they said, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. The one gentleman joked to me that he said, driving a sports car will be like somebody going out to ride a horse. You have to go to a special farm. You have to go to a special place where they have a stable of cars you can drive. Where it's the same with, if I want to go ride a horse, I can't ride it to my home. I have to go to a special place and ride the horse. Yeah. And that's maybe how people will get a chance to drive cars in the future.
So it will become more of a hobby then, to drive a car?
I think so, because from what I've heard and from what I've read, it'll be a challenge to have humans on the road with autonomous vehicles.
Okay.
Because the autonomous vehicles themselves will be, I think, at a performance level that'll be hard for humans to consistently match.
Okay.
Interestingly, the dangerous vehicle will not be the autonomous vehicle, it might be the human-driven vehicle in an autonomous world. So there's a theory that maybe you won't have, there'll be a point at which there'll be a flip over to 100% autonomous, because it'll be very hard for humans to kind of drive in that environment.
Will it also be difficult because, with autonomous driving cars, they can talk to each other, like sharing data and so on and so on. But how do you predict the behavior of a driver that is in this fleet of autonomous cars? Yeah,
the driver, with our attention span the way it is, you see those situations where people are looking at their, their flip phone and tripping on the sidewalk. And, it's the same with a car. I always joke that we're in the business of assessing roads. Our inspectors, come to work every day fully motivated, and they stay, they don't sleep, they don't take a break, they're consistent in their judgment. And that's where AI really makes it tough for humans to compete, is there's still a sort of a realm where humans are superior to AI, but we're deep into deep learning, and it's hard for humans to compete with deep learning now. The ubiquity of sensors, the advances in the technology. This is my third machine learning company in 15 years. The technology has matured to the point where it's going to be hard for people to compete with that.
So is AI the only solution, or the key driver we have for autonomous driving, or are there other key players that play into this?
Yeah, that's a good question, because if you have autonomous vehicles, it sort of causes you to rethink all the infrastructure that exists to support human-driven cars. So for example, do we need parking garages and parking lots? Do we need street signs? Do we need various other things that we take for granted that are there to service human drivers? So you may see a situation where the cityscape itself starts to change shape to accommodate. Do you need all these different lanes? Do you even need street lights? If cars are talking to one another, do you even need that?
Yeah.
So there'll be a day when, I think perhaps in the not too distant future, when if somebody were frozen now and woke up in, say, Los Angeles 30 or 40 years from now, they may be astonished what they see in the way the city is taking shape.
So with this new mobility, let's call it like this mobility of the future, will we have also have a not mobility, but a city of the future? Because like you said, maybe you don't need traffic lights or lanes. So, and for that you need, of course, people to trust in these autonomous cars.
Yeah.
How do we get that all together, that we have this future of mobility, the future city, and people really using these services?
That's a good question. I think what I've seen from some of the big automakers right now is they're starting to think of them as beyond making cars, as to be transportation providers. And as they think about that, they're thinking, the vehicle has had a big impact on the shape and size and nature of cities. So a lot of the more sophisticated auto manufacturers or tier one suppliers are actually thinking about what the city would look like
Yeah.
And so there's a really interesting dialogue going on between the public sector, mayors and cities, and the people who use the city, particularly the auto and transportation providers. And that's part of this whole smart city phenomenon that people see. I think it really is a case of smart cities. And this, I think the thinking is, look, 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, people didn't anticipate the impact that cars would have. And so in some cases, there wasn't as much planning and forethought about what cities should do and how they should organize themselves. And as a consequence, there were a lot of disruptions. And I think we've had an experience with cars now, and maybe this time around with the autonomous vehicles, we may take a more thoughtful, forward-thinking way of organizing our cities.
So what I read about like Denmark and how are they organizing their cities, because they also want to make it cleaner, like you said, less cars in the cities, so you have less crashes, of course, and less accidents. And they want to provide solutions that people taking the bike instead of the car. So is this development against autonomous cars, or does it help them shape the city of the future?
Great question. I don't know. I think the jury's still out, but my guess is they'll sync up nicely. I think because at one level, and it sounds strange to say this, the autonomous vehicles will be a little bit more safer, a little bit more aware. I'll just give you an example. We have in our hometown of Pittsburgh, we have one of the few places where you can take an autonomous ride, and you can ride in an autonomous car. I have ridden in. It's a little weird because although the car has a driver and somebody else in the front seat, they're actually not driving the car.
Okay.
So it's kind of a weird experience being in the backseat of a car where the person behind the wheel turns around and starts talking to you when you're going 40 miles an hour. That's pretty weird.
But it works.
But it works. But one of the interesting things is because they're using this LiDAR and various other technologies, they can see a 360 view of everything around that car for a great distance. So they're actually more aware than a human driver would be of their surroundings. So for somebody on a bike, that's actually a safer scenario where this vehicle is taking in far more data than the human driver could, whose vision is limited to forward and to a little bit to the side. So that's going to change the nature of, that's going to make things safer, I think. So in the end, I think you'll probably have a nice symmetry between people using other modes of transportation and cars, autonomous cars.
You said that the more mature or the more sophisticated OEMs, tier ones and so on and so on, think beyond themselves as,
just vehicle providers.
Yes, vehicle providers. They don't manufacture, but they're thinking, like you said, above. So the next big thing would something be like mobility as a service? Mobility as a service.
I think what's happening, I think there are people already doing that. So I think in the case of Uber, I'm speculating. This is not based on any inside information, but my own kind of sense of Uber and perhaps Lyft and some others is that they're using the data they're getting from us as users of Uber and Lyft services, and they're using that to rethink or predict how this would be used if there were no other cars on the road. I know for a time they were investing in autonomous vehicles. They still are. I think they hit the reset button recently, and not sure why, but I think they're deep into that. But I think they're probably thinking at a very high level, kind of 3 moves ahead as to where all this data that they have can tell them about where autonomous vehicles are going to go. And so I think when you look at the Ubers and Lyfts of the world and similar companies, they're ready for this future. I think the technology is getting there. For anybody who thinks that it's going to take a long time, I would give them one image that I have at a presentation I saw in California recently. Gentleman showed a picture of Madison Avenue in New York City, looking down Madison Avenue, taken in 1900. And the streets were packed, but they were packed with horses and carriages, and there was one car all the way down Madison Avenue. He then was able to get a picture from 1913, 13 years later, 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago still. Same field of view, same position, looking down the street. There was one horse and hundreds of cars. And so people that think that this autonomous vehicle revolution is going to take decades don't understand that when it gets momentum, it happens very, very fast. And that was 100 years ago. So I think you're going to see this revolution when it kicks in. It'll kick into high gear and it'll go very, very fast.
Like we've seen it with other big players, like we have now Google, Facebook, and so on. Because this started very slow and then it kicked in and exploded more or less.
Right, and the technology has matured. I mean, machine learning 15 years ago, when I first had my first machine learning company, was a sort of a black art that nobody understood, and 4 people knew how to program, and even they didn't know how it worked actually. And now, now that it's matured to the point where, in our case, we use it to assess a whole bunch of physical assets on the road. It works. It really, really works. And the sensors are cheap, and now it's ubiquitous in our lives. Machine learning is, touches our lives every day now. So the technology's matured.
Yeah.
The belief that it's going to happen is there. The capital is starting to move there. Big companies are moving there, so it's going to happen.
So maybe we have the next Steve Jobs, and then it happens.
Yeah,
really.
maybe the next Steve Jobs. Yeah.
Good. Thank you for this interesting talk, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Great. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.